Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, October 9th, 2018. Time for yet another show. Anything happened yesterday? I don't know. I'm starting to slow down in my old age, I guess, in my ability to track the news as accurately as I think I used to. Or maybe Twitter is just getting fed up with what's going on. Yesterday was another weird day. We had a fake swearing-in ceremony, which is not entirely without precedent. I don't know about the Supreme Court, but certainly I have observed that the Senate and many members of the House have been following suit, have staged ceremonial swearing-in ceremonies after the actual swearing-in ceremony, mostly because you're not allowed typically to take the kind of photos that they want to take as keepsakes on the House and Senate floor when they actually do the swearing-in ceremonies. And in the Senate, they actually do ceremonial photography only, swearing in, ceremonial, whatever, a second run through, in the old Senate chamber, not in the current Senate chamber, which is kind of a weird thing because I could see staging photos, like at a bar mitzvah. You come early, or at a wedding, and you come early and you stand on the set where the whole thing is going to take place. In this case, the Senate floor, take those photos. But instead they do it in the old Senate chamber, which is very, archaic looking, and I don't know. But for whatever reason, that's become the tradition. I have not seen them do this for the Supreme Court, but Donald Trump, being the television president that he is, decided that he was going to do this second ceremonial swearing-in thing, which I think we should have told him. And I tried in this morning's post to see if we can make this thing work. I say we tell him that it's like a toggle switch. He was already sworn in officially was it on Saturday right after the vote? Perhaps that was the case. And then, but Trump wanted to have a made-for-TV event. But by swearing him in again, he's now undone the first swearing in, and Kavanaugh is no longer a justice of the Supreme Court. And I wondered if we pretended that was the case for long enough and with enough intensity, whether he would believe it and hold another secret private swearing-in ceremony just to be triple sure that he totally did it right. I don't know whether that would work on him or not. I'd be willing to try it, as we all should be. Anything to confuse the dotard. Anyway, he decided to have this nice little event and whatever, and it was very annoying and insulting, the fact that A, television went along with it, and B, that I don't know exactly how this happened, but for some reason he got the rest of the Supreme Court justices to show up, and I don't know whether they thought they were going for some nice, ceremony of some kind, and they thought they'd be supportive of their new colleague, even if they don't think he belongs on the Supreme Court. You're going to have to work with this guy, allegedly, for some period of time, so you try and make nice, and so everyone was noting that the rest of the justices were there. Ruth Bader Ginsburg had to sit through this nonsense, and it very quickly became overtly political because, well, Donald Trump doesn't either can't understand the distinctions that he's supposed to make between political activity and governmental activity, or intentionally likes to blur that background, blur that line, just as he likes to blur the lines between which funds are his personally, which funds belong to the Trump organization, and now, of course, which funds belong to the United States government. And he doesn't like those distinctions, and he thinks any funds that he can control, either partially or indirectly or directly, are his to do with what he pleases, and let the regulators catch up. And hey, if something's wrong, we'll pay a fine. That's his usual MO. Let's see. I guess other news of the day. Good thing to know. This morning we learned very important news. Donald Trump is going to have lunch with Kanye West. I can't think of anything less important to report than that. But there it is, and everybody is making sure that everybody else knows. The mealtime presidency continues with Donald Trump. He lives from meal to meal. And this is the way he conducts business. If it's not on the golf course, then it's at lunch or at dinner. I don't know if he does a breakfast thing or not. I think not. He's not an early riser, and he's probably not out of the residence in time to do a working breakfast with anyone else. But nothing he likes better than setting the table in the cabinet room for lunch. I think he thinks that's the most impressive room to bring visitors for a meeting. I would have argued that it was perhaps the Oval Office, but he loves that big table, and he thinks it's a banquet table, and he loves to set it with China for lunch, and it's kind of an unusual event to do that, but seems to be the way he wants to conduct all of his business. I understand they are meeting with an agenda that I guess was mostly designed, I don't know, I mean, maybe it was Kanye's idea, but it's sounding more like Donald Trump's idea, as the agenda covers all of the important subjects that you would want to talk about with an important public policy persona like Kanye West. Prison reform, violence in Chicago, et cetera, gang activity, all of the stuff that, you would talk to a black guy about, I guess is what's happening here. Although, high on the list, and I hope that Kanye put this one on the list, although, maybe it would be nice if Donald Trump put it on the list too. Manufacturing issues. I don't know whether that's really going to be discussed or whether they threw that in there to keep me from saying things like, he's talking to the black guy about crime again. But too late. I've already done it. All right, let's see. Where else might we roam with this one? Look at this. Michael Musson has a comment we must pass along, and Greg has retweeted it, so we know it's worth taking a look at. It's on my screen twice. House GOP members taking after McConnell's duplicitousness. Duplicitousness. I guess that's real, right? Duplicitousness. And campaigning on how they voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act in order to protect millions of people with pre-existing conditions. I guess that is interesting. So that's their new take on why they oppose the Affordable Care Act. They oppose the Affordable Care Act because gaslighting, everybody. It prevents you from getting care if you have a pre-existing medical condition. That's, of course, the exact opposite of what's happening. But that's why he says they're taking their cues from Mitch McConnell. Let's take a look at this story. Jonathan Cohn in Huffington Post reports this one under the headline of Republicans are using their families to defend their records on health care. Ordinarily, that might not be such a crazy thing to do, but here we are. The stories they tell about loved ones are true. The stories they tell about policy, not so much. Let's take a look. Republicans in some key races around the country have come up with a new strategy for defending their voting records on health care, and it does need defense. They are telling true stories about their family members and untrue stories about Republican legislation. The latest to try it is Mike Bishop, two-term Michigan congressman who represents a relatively conservative district stretching from the Detroit suburbs to Lansing. That is to say, right up to where there are some Democrats on the one side and right up to where some Democrats might be on the other side, and stopping short on both. Should be an interesting-looking district. In 2016, President Donald Trump won it by 7 percentage points. Bishop's winning margin was more than twice as big. But 2018 is shaping up as a more difficult year for Republicans, and this time Bishop is running against Elissa Slotkin, a former intelligence officer who did 3 tours in Iraq and later served in the Obama administration. The Cook Political Report calls the race a toss-up, so does 538.com, and if Slotkin wins in Michigan's 8th district, a big reason will be Bishop's longtime support for repealing the Affordable Care Act, a.k.a., of course, Obamacare. In May 2017, after the House voted narrowly to pass its version of repeal legislation, the Republican caucus held a celebratory event It depends how you want to say that one. I don't know why I decided to go with celebratory. Celebratory. It's a celebrity-studded celebratory event. There were no celebrities there. With Trump, even though he was there, at the White House. Slotkin has said frequently that seeing Bishop smiling and beaming in the Rose Garden is what convinced her to run, because she remembers what happened to her mother, a breast cancer survivor who lost her job, wasn't able to get insurance, and then struggled to pay for care after a diagnosis of stage 4 ovarian cancer. One new Slotkin ad includes a video of her mother giving a toast at Slotkin's wedding, which the couple moved to an earlier date so that Slotkin's mom could be there. When I saw Congressman Bishop at the White House, and you know what that means, right? When I saw Congressman Bishop at the White House, something inside me broke, Slotkin says in the spot. Mr. Bishop, that's a dereliction of duty, and that's a fireable offense. The ad is emotional and devastating, and by the way, embedded in the article, so you can take a look at it later, and it may help explain why Bishop is now talking about one of his own family members on Sunday morning, while he and Slotkin debated each other on WDIV, the Detroit NBC affiliate. Bishop said that his wife grew up with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. My wife has a pre-existing condition, Bishop said. It is first and foremost in my mind. Not that he's helping in any way, but okay. Bishop then defended his vote on Obamacare repeal, saying that the House bill would have taken care of people like his wife and Slotkin's mother, the ones who historically struggled to get coverage on the open market. When I voted for that bill, Bishop said, there is no way I would ever have voted for it if it hadn't included protections for people with pre-existing conditions. Sigh. Voters in some other parts of the country would probably find such vows familiar. In California, Dana Rohrabacher, veteran Republican representative who also voted for the House repeal bill, has a new advertisement in which he talks about his daughter who battled and survived childhood leukemia. It was devastating to my family, but we got through it, and today she's doing great, Rohrabacher says in the video, which includes several family members. That's why I'm taking on both parties and fighting for those with pre-existing conditions. The one thing that both parties might actually, sometimes be forced to admit that they agree on is the idea, anyway, that they need to tell people with pre-existing conditions that they are offering some help. But he's taking on both parties by telling them, no, we really want to do something. In Missouri, Josh Hawley, the state attorney general challenging incumbent Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill, has written and talked about his oldest son who has a rare chronic disease. One advertisement features a sun-drenched shot of the family outside with Hawley's adorable little boy bouncing a ball in the air. We've got two perfect little boys. Just ask their mama, Hawley says, before mentioning the pre-existing condition. We know what that's like. I support forcing insurance companies to cover all pre-existing conditions. The ad is undeniably moving and wildly at odds with Hawley's words and deeds on health care. Same goes for the promises of Bishop and Rohrabacher, whose efforts to gut protections for people with pre-existing conditions are a matter of public record. So here is that record. What Republicans really tried to do about health care, in case you missed, the last decade. The 2017 House bill Bishop and Rohrabacher backed was called the American Health Care Act, or AHCA. Boring. Oh, I have a sound effect for that, too. Dang it. I keep forgetting that I have these things.
Boring!
There we go. I knew I had it somewhere. Let's see. Yeah, that is a boring name, isn't it? Oh, fine. It's better than the really wild, stupid idea names that try to come up with some kind of acronym that spells something. Although early versions of the legislation left the Affordable Care Act's insurance regulations mostly intact, the version that finally passed the House included an amendment designed to win support from the most conservative Republicans that undermined pre-existing condition protections, even for people with employer-sponsored insurance. Had the GOP bill become law, states could have requested special waivers from regulations so that insurers could charge higher premiums to people who had pre-existing conditions and had lapses of insurance as short as 2 months. The waivers would also have allowed insurers to sell policies that didn't pay for mental health treatment, maternity care, prescriptions, and other services that the Affordable Care Act declares essential. So, of course, what was happening here was, oh, well, we're going to force insurance companies to cover people with pre-existing conditions. They can just charge whatever they want for it. But it is covered, and so therefore we can say our bill covers pre-existing conditions. A fat lot of good that would do anybody. The bill included language promising to protect people with pre-existing conditions and prohibited insurers from denying coverage outright. Republicans like Bishop mention this constantly, but as numerous independent analysts pointed out, that provision wouldn't provide much protection when insurers could manipulate prices and benefits in ways that made it difficult or impossible for people with serious conditions to get insurance that paid for the care they need. It's important to distinguish between actual support for pre-existing condition protections and lip service. Sabrina Corlett, a research professor at Georgetown University's Center for Health Insurance Reform, told HuffPost. The problem with the multiple efforts to repeal the ACA and, quote, replace its pre-existing condition protections with alternatives, such as the final House amendment and the bills that have been introduced more recently, is that they all include massive loopholes that will make coverage effectively inaccessible for people with health care needs. Sounds like a problem. The GOP bill also included new funding for high-risk pools, which would have offered coverage to people whom insurers wouldn't cover. This is something else that Bishop and other Republicans frequently cite as proof of their commitment to helping people who can't get coverage because of their health status. But the money the bill allocated to the pools was well below what analysts said was necessary to provide people with the kind of protection that they get today. That's not at all surprising, given that high-risk pools existed before and suffered from chronic underfunding. Oh, and the House bill would have slashed funding for Medicaid, undermining its current guarantee of coverage, and leaving 14 million low-income Americans without insurance, according to the Congressional Budget Office. During the 2017 debate, Bishop cited the CBO analysis as proof that Republicans were, quote, following through on the promise to lower premiums, provide major tax relief, and reduce the deficit, though it proved the opposite. As for the coverage loss, Bishop assured I'm having difficulty today, the Detroit Free Press, that he was confident that Congress will build on the progress outlined in this report to make health care work for everyone. He didn't specify how, and his campaign spokesman did not respond to questions HuffPost submitted Monday morning. The following section, this is a lengthy article, and I think probably considerably longer than it needs to be. There is, of course, the next section on why the GOP's records on health care matters, and I think we are all well aware of that. The real choices that face voters in November. Can you figure out what to do in November? Does anybody here in the audience need any help to figure out what to do in November with respect to finding the better of the two parties on the question of health care? If not, then I will conclude the reading. It's already gone on, I think, longer than absolutely necessary, but a very good point, and thank you for bringing it to our attention, Michael and Greg, in that one. Let's see. Let's see what else we can catch up with and decide on the course of the rest of the show. I've got to hit a couple of buttons and cool the studio here in the worldwide headquarters of Kagro in the Morning Show. It's a warm morning here, and I guess we're getting ready for another hurricane to come through, though it won't be here for another couple of days. It just feels like this wave of humidity is sort of slinking into the area ahead of the big storm. This one, Hurricane Michael now coming next, and I guess another round of evacuations further to our south. Not really predicted to have a major impact here in our area, but just on the radar and well worth paying attention to. Okay, let's see. Picking up on some of the stories from yesterday, trying to fill in the blanks on a few things and staying abreast of other news. I have a Vox explainer that will tell us all we need to know, I guess. Oh, it's the AMP version of it. So let's make sure that we get the right thing here and get everything looking the way it's supposed to be. I don't know why so many content providers are so willing to work with AMP, given what a problem They are for people who want to see the story and see it credited properly to the person who wrote it and formatted as the outlet intended. But I guess nobody cares for whatever reason. But it's a big problem for us. Jen Kirby, though, writes for Vox how the weird case of the missing Interpol chief got even weirder. We do need more information on this. Not that the Chinese are coming out with much more, but it's a very odd situation. I thought we should perhaps keep on top of it. The head of Interpol vanished in China. We know about that. Now he's resigned his post and is under investigation for corruption, which is one of those weird borderline plays that governments sometimes pull, with corruption investigation being pretty good cover. You don't want corruption to go uninvestigated and unchallenged. On the other hand, particularly authoritarian governments who can control the flow of news simply label their dissidents corrupt and hope that that message takes root among the readers of the news, the consumers of the news in their country, and they ignore what's going on. We have our own versions of that here in this country, and things, of course, getting worse under the gaslighting Trump administration. Let's check this out. The strange story of the vanishing Interpol chief just got even stranger. Days after Meng Hongwei, the president of Interpol, was reported missing in China, the Chinese government said on Monday that Meng was under supervision and being investigated on bribery charges. Meng, a Chinese national, has also resigned from his post with immediate effect, according to a statement from Interpol. It's a stunning development in a bizarre saga that began unfolding late last week. Meng, who led Interpol, an international organization that coordinates law enforcement agencies worldwide, traveled from France to China on September 29th. Then he disappeared. This much we know. Meng's wife went to the authorities in Lyon, France on October 4th, where Interpol is headquartered, to say she hadn't heard from her husband since he landed in China. Meng's wife also told journalists Sunday that Meng had sent her a text message of a knife emoji before he vanished, which she interpreted as a sign that he was in danger. According to the South China Morning Post, which we read yesterday, Meng is a former Communist Party official who lost his position in the party last year. And of course, that can sometimes be the difference between life and death, I suppose, for high-ranking officials in China. Chinese authorities did not offer many details on what Meng is accused of or why he has been detained. The Ministry of Public Security only indicated that he was being investigated for bribery and other crimes related to his willfulness. It actually says that. Willfulness, according to the Associated Press. That's a crime in China, I guess. Meng helped set Interpol's policies and agenda, but he doesn't run the day-to-day operations of the world's largest international police organization, which provides support to law enforcement agencies across 192 countries. The job belongs to the Interpol's Secretary General, Jürgen Stock. Not Birkenstock, Jürgen Stock, according to NPR, who said in a statement that the agency was trying to get more information about Meng's status from Chinese authorities. Kim Jong-yang of South Korea will take over as Interpol president until a new one is confirmed. Interpol focuses on cross-border or transnational crimes, such as trafficking and, well, cases of missing people. So that's difficult, isn't it? It's probably best known for issuing color-coded notices or worldwide alerts for law enforcement. For example, a red notice is basically a flag that a specific agency is looking to apprehend someone. Interpol itself can't arrest people, but critics say some authoritarian countries, Russia and China among them, we mentioned this yesterday, and we should double-check on that Russia angle and make sure we had it right. Russia and China among them. They abuse the system, according to this article, to target strong critics or dissidents by issuing wanted notices through the organization. That guy's corrupt. We want him arrested. China has also used Interpol to identify allegedly corrupt officials. That led to some speculation that Meng might have been ensnared in an anti-corruption investigation, a suspicion that was ultimately confirmed, although we should probably point out, though it's been confirmed, that doesn't necessarily mean that we confirm that there really is corruption going on here. We can merely confirm that the Chinese are willing to say there is. Chinese President Xi Jinping has recently presided over a sweeping anti-corruption crackdown, which he used to help consolidate his power earlier this year. I've heard the same thing happening in Saudi Arabia. Officials who are targeted by the anti-graft campaign often vanish for weeks or months. But it's a particularly peculiar plot twist that Meng himself got caught up in such a crackdown. China had cheered his ascension to the top of the international agency when he took over in 2016 as a sign of its growing global clout. Meng's detainment may ultimately end up being a setback for China's aspirations to rise to global leadership. Julian Ku, a professor at Hofstra University's Maurice A. Dean School of Law, important to know that it's named after Maurice A. Dean, he told the New York Times that the fact that Meng was disappeared without any notice to Interpol will undermine this Chinese global outreach effort. It's hard to imagine another international organization feeling comfortable placing a Chinese national in charge without feeling nervous that this might happen, Ku said. Meng's disappearance also puts more attention on the Xi's widening anti-corruption campaign in China and the country's draconian detainment and judicial processes. China has already garnered unwanted international attention this year for its mass detention of religious minorities, including the Muslim minority Uyghurs. The circumstances, I always wonder about the pronunciation of that one. Maybe I can check during the break. The circumstances are vastly different from Meng's, but both reveal the increasingly authoritarian policies of the Xi government, which are often at odds with China's attempts to sell itself as a vital international partner. That won't stop Trump from offering him more beautiful chocolate cake at Mar-a-Lago. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I did check over the break and found at least one automated online pronunciation guide, and apparently YouTube is filled with these things. Pronunciation guides for the name of the religious minority named in the previous article, and you could argue that I wasn't terribly far off from the pronunciation preferred here, at least in this video. They say basically "ui," like UI is pronounced ui, not exactly WE, but ui, Uyghurs, and I said oi, which is like oi, the Uyghurs. I can't believe it. And so that's wrong, right? But if you listen really carefully, Uyghurs, not terribly far off, depending on how you parse things and what kind of excuses you're willing to make for yourself and your ignorance of how to pronounce certain words. I like to go as far as I can in allowing myself leeway with that. Other stories now rising to top level issue. Actually, I want to maybe take a detour off of this one to take a look at the linked articles provided in support of the assertion that certain other authoritarian countries sometimes take advantage of and abuse Interpol's system, particularly the Russia allegations. This points to, looks fairly familiar. We may have read this one. What they're pointing to is an entry in The Atlantic from Kathy Gilsinian in May 30th of this year, how Russia tries to catch its, quote, criminals by abusing Interpol. I know we've discussed their methods before, and I think that we came, my recollection yesterday was that the Russians use Interpol red notices to try and convince Western governments to capture and hand back to them dissidents who have fled the country seeking political asylum, by saying what they're really doing is absconding with monies that they have illegally embezzled or stolen, either from the state or from other citizens of Russia. And that's a hard thing to turn your back on, because that's happening all the time. I mean, that's what the oligarchs are up to. And the difference between somebody who's an embezzler and somebody who has semi-governmental, quasi-governmental authority in Russia is, are you friends at the moment with Vladimir Putin? And really that comes probably down to the question of, are you kicking back enough money to Vladimir Putin or otherwise doing his bidding? If you are, you're an oligarch. If you aren't, you're a mobster outlaw who is absconding with ill-gotten gains. If you are a friend of his, at worst, you're laundering those ill-gotten gains through Donald Trump. And I imagine that the election to the presidency of Donald Trump not only did a great deal for Putin on a policy level, and we have speculated about how much it would do for him on a personal level and just make more money for him and for his friends. But I don't know whether we really have explicitly discussed how much more legitimate looking Putin might think his money laundering and the money laundering of his friends in the United States through Trump will now look to both American, Russian, and other international authorities. If this activity is not going to be criminalized by the United States because the chief law enforcement officer of the United States is himself corrupt and in on this because he's profiting wildly from it, well then, it would be awfully difficult for even the international community to condemn that which is apparently legal in both countries. Even though it is in fact illegal in both countries, they're just getting a pass due to the fact that the people who are allowed to issue passes to people essentially are themselves at the head of these conspiracies to steal all that money. Anyway, let's take a look at this article just briefly. How Russia tries to catch its criminals by abusing Interpol, and see if it's the same story. It was, well, this is going to be a dramatic reading of it. It was over almost as soon as it began, but not before it was live tweeted. Bill Browder, the hedge fund manager and Putin fan turned human rights activist and anti-Putin crusader, once a Putin fan, I didn't know that, was in Spain to give evidence in anti-corruption proceedings implicating the Russian government, according to his Twitter account. And then he tweeted this, accompanied by a photo, apparently from the back of a Spanish police car. Urgent. Just was arrested by Spanish police in Madrid on a Russian Interpol arrest warrant. Going to the police station right now. Within 2 hours, he tweeted a selfie with this caption, "Good news, Spanish National Police just released me after Interpol General Secretary in Leon. Advised them not to honor the new Russian Interpol red notice. This is the 6th time that Russia has abused Interpol in my case." The tweets were dramatic, if in some respects not quite right. Interpol, formerly the International Criminal Police Organization, that's a bad name, isn't it, does not issue arrest warrants. It's not really an international police force, having no cops or warrant powers of its own, but more of a coordinating mechanism or information clearinghouse for its 192 member states, any of whom can issue notices to all the others that an individual is wanted. This is useful, for instance, when someone commits a crime in one country and flees to another to escape prosecution. It's up to local law enforcement to decide whether and how to act on such notice within the constraints of their own legal systems. But this is also where the problem comes in. It can effectively be a crime in member states like Russia, Iran, or Venezuela to engage in anti-government activism or even run-of-the-mill journalism, activities that in other member countries, including most Western democracies, are protected by law. And despite efforts to guard against abuses, otherwise laudable international law enforcement coordination can have the perverse effect of undermining democratic rule of law by giving authoritarian countries the opportunity to influence how democracies enforce their own rules. Interpol's constitution, they have one, tries to guard against this by forbidding any intervention or activities of a political, military, religious, or racial character. Here, too, Browder's account is a little off. Through its spokesperson, Interpol flatly denies ever having issued a red notice, the formal wanted alert to member police forces reviewed and approved directly by Interpol for Browder. Interpol has repeatedly rejected Russian requests to issue one for Browder, deeming them clearly politically motivated. Browder is a key force behind the Magnitsky Act, you know that, named for his lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, who died in prison after uncovering a massive tax fraud linked to Russian government officials in which much of Browder's own money disappeared. I wonder what would happen if we discovered a massive tax fraud linked to American government officials like, say, Donald Trump, in which other people's money disappeared. Among other things, the act sanctions wealthy associates of Russian President Vladimir Putin and is by many accounts uniquely enraging to the Russian government. There is another way, however. While a red notice requires approval from Interpol itself, it's a so-called diffusion notice is just an alert member countries circulate among themselves. Interpol's press office wrote to me in October 2017. A diffusion was circulated in relation to Mr. Browder. However, this was found to be non-compliant following a review by the General Secretariat. It's Interpol's leadership body based in Lyon. A diffusion is a request for cooperation circulated directly among member countries, and this is where Russia can game the system. Interpol says it requested the notice be removed from national databases, but it has no way of enforcing that compliance with that. Browder told The Atlantic that Russia has tried to issue 6 notices on him, all of them ultimately rejected as abusive, but sometimes it's just a numbers game. The Russians try stuff 100 times, and sometimes it works. Browder told Andrew Higgins of the New York Times 2 years ago, they can fail 99 times, but the 100th time it could work. For them, that makes it all worthwhile. In fact, Higgins and others have detailed many cases of Russia's using Interpol this way. In 2013, a report by the advocacy group Fair Trials International, for instance, detailed the case of their client Peter Silayev, a Russian environmental activist who fled Russia and was arrested in Spain on a Russian warrant and threatened with extradition. He had been accused of hooliganism, of all things, in Russia after what Fair Trials described as an ordinary protest in Moscow in 2010. A Spanish court ultimately rejected Russia's extradition request, but not until after Silayev had spent 8 days in prison and 6 months fighting a legal battle in Spain. Not unlike certain problems we have here, wherein certain favored political actors can in fact engage in rioting and be called very fine people, whereas disfavored political actors can engage in peaceful protest but be accused, say, I don't know, by the Senate Majority Leader of assaulting members of Congress. And imagine if they were to have arrest warrants issued for them and for them to flee to another country only to have Interpol say that they were guilty of hooliganism. Pavel Ivlev, a Russian-born lawyer who has helped clients get red notices removed. How come that's sort of... okay, I must have added a different word to it. Now, Pavel... Well, okay, he's a Russian-born lawyer. He's helped clients get red notices removed, and for him, it's personal. He was once the subject of such a notice himself for 9.5 years. A version of what happened to Browder this morning, he said, has happened to him at least twice before, once in Brussels and once in Lisbon. In the latter case, he was trying to make a connecting flight when authorities apprehended him at the airport, asking him if he knew he was wanted in Russia. He did. He had formerly served as a lawyer for Mikhail Khodorkovsky and his oil company, Yukos, and was one of several co-defendants with Khodorkovsky, accused of enormous-scale embezzlement, which he denies. Of course I deny charges of embezzling 195 metric tons of crude oil, he told me. Khodorkovsky, too, denies the charges against him, for which he spent 10 years in Russian prison. Ivanev, I don't know, fled to the United States, as many of us might, where he is now a citizen. In the end, his apprehension was brief. Portuguese authorities checked the status of the notice with Interpol and, determining that it was specious, let him go. So I missed my flight, but I took the next one. So it's not too bad, but it's not pleasant, he said. Browder's case, which Ivlev was in which he was not involved, may have been similar. Spanish government official speaking on background told The Atlantic that the Spanish police had proceeded on the basis of an Interpol alarm, which Interpol says is no longer in effect, but checked with Interpol after detaining him because it seemed politically motivated, and released him. In those two cases, the reach of Russian law into Western democracies was disturbing, but mainly a nuisance. In Silaev's case, it was more severe. Magnitsky and Khodorkovsky, who were actually prosecuted in Russia under Russian law and imprisoned there, suffered far worse. Magnitsky was reportedly tortured before he died. Still, the Browder incident, brief as it was, shows something important about the use and misuse of international organizations. International law enforcement cooperation is a fine thing when, as it often does, it helps apprehend legitimate criminals trying to evade justice in their own country. But ultimately, the international justice system is only as good as the countries writing and enforcing the laws, and some notions of justice are not fit for export overseas. Well, very ominous. Lots to think about in that, and lots to keep in mind in the case, in case, let's say, other red notices or arrest warrants are issued from out of Russia in the near future. China also listed as an abuser in this, and just sort of curious to see what they have to say about this. Is this, and whose picture is included here? I can't tell whether that's, I don't think I would recognize. Yes, look at this. The article linked here says, under the headline, where is this? This is Human Rights Watch. Their article is entitled Interpol, Address China's Red Notice Abuses. Global police organization should protect against wrongful arrests and extraditions, says Human Rights Watch, and I would tend to agree. The piece, though, is illustrated with a photo of China's Vice Minister of Public Security speaking at Interpol's General Assembly in Bali in October 2016. And you may remember from our reading of the stories, China's Vice Minister of Public Security is Meng Hongwei, who was, until recently, the president of Interpol. How intriguing. Interpol is being called on in September of last year, actually, to address China's misuse of the Red Notice system during its upcoming meeting in Beijing, Human Rights Watch said today. That was September 25th, 2017. In a letter to Interpol, Human Rights Watch also raised concerns about respecting human rights under the leadership of Interpol's new president, Chinese Vice Minister for Public Security Meng Hongwei. So it's interesting. The concern there, this is such a interesting and tangled web. The concern of Human Rights Watch was that putting a Chinese national, and not just any Chinese national, but a Chinese national who was, up until recently, a high-ranking party official in the Chinese Communist Party, in charge of Interpol, knowing that China was apt to abuse Interpol red notices. And if it's up to Interpol to decide when something is politically motivated and whether or not to facilitate the honoring of that notice, you could see how it would be of some concern to Human Rights Watch if a former Chinese government official was now in charge of determining whether or not China's red notices were valid or not. How interesting and ironic, then, that Meng Hongwei should find himself arrested by Chinese authorities after all. And I did speculate yesterday, and we still have no evidence one way or the other on this one, but wouldn't it be interesting if, in Meng Hongwei's view, the best route forward for China was to prove that even high-ranking Chinese Communist Party officials, or former party officials, put in charge of international organizations would honor the charter and the norms of the organization so that the international community became comfortable with Chinese officials heading up international organizations, and that duty to the organization angered Chinese officials who thought that his first duty should be to China's government and the Chinese Communist Party, and so they arrested him for it. I don't know if that's the case, but that seems like a fairly plausible explanation. And what a conundrum. How do we include the Chinese in the international community if they continue to refuse to play by the rules the rest of us play by? And haven't we seen enough here at home to know that when you're dealing with another party that just doesn't seem interested in adhering to norms when power politics are at stake, what do you do with these guys? Very interesting, very odd situation, to say the least. All right, let's see. There are a few other things. And China figures prominently in something that I was thinking of saving for our Friday show, too. So rather than transition to that, I'll just say keep an ear out for more international intrigue later in the week. Let's see. I think, did Greg bring this one to our attention yesterday? Maybe not. But we probably should have read this one yesterday, because some of the discussion back and forth about how angry to stay and in what form your anger should manifest itself with respect to the Kavanaugh confirmation here. And I have E.J. Dion's piece yesterday, though I only have the AMP version before me at the moment, entitled "We Need to Stay Angry About Kavanaugh." This was kind of an extraordinary piece. Dion, like Norm Ornstein, I think, he's traveled sort of a similar trajectory where he was pretty much a steady centrist, and if not necessarily a both sideser. Like Norm Ornstein has really shed that trope. And E.J. Dion has as well, but it took them some time to do it, but now I think they're both pretty much all in. So he writes, "We need to stay angry about Kavanaugh," and I thought I might read it to you so that you, too, could stay angry about Kavanaugh in case you needed any help with it. "The Supreme Court's legitimacy is in tatters. Conservative forces in the country, led by the Republican Party, have completed a judicial coup, decades in the making. Republicans rushed through Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation to avoid the possible consequences of an election. They aborted a full investigation because they feared what it might find. They made themselves complicit in a presidential attack on Christine Blasey Ford, a brave woman who asked only that her case against Kavanaugh be taken seriously. After all these outrages, there will be calls for a renewal of civility. But if the problem is the people said nasty things about one another, as if the problem is that people said nasty things about one another, but the answer to this power grab cannot be passive acceptance in the name of being polite. The causes and consequences of what just happened must be acknowledged frankly," which might have been a nice thing to do at the beginning of this downslide, or even further in to this collapse of norms. It was thinking along with the idea of the Florida 2000 recount, the Brooks Brothers riot, and the lack of enthusiasm among Senate Democrats for joining in questioning the outcome of the Electoral College vote in 2000. We were, of course, urged to offer up passive acceptance in the name of being polite, in the name of what was good for the country. Anyway, back to the article. The conservative struggle for the court began in the 1960s, but it hit its stride when, in the Bush v. Gore decision after the 2000 election, 5 conservative justices violated the principles they claimed to uphold on states' rights and the use of the Equal Protection Doctrine to stop a recount of votes in Florida requested by Al Gore, the Democratic nominee. Thus, they made George W. Bush president. You all know the general story of that. The pro-Bush justices made abundantly clear that they were grasping at any arguments available to achieve a certain outcome by declaring, quote, "Our consideration is limited to the present circumstances." Translation, "Once Bush is in, please forget what we said here." Bush then appointed 2 staunch conservatives to the court, John G. Roberts Jr., because it's the New York or the Washington Post in this case, one of our formal newspapers, one of Bush's legal foot soldiers in Florida as Chief Justice, as well as Samuel Alito, who also was a junior, by the way. More recently, Senate Republicans kept the late Antonin Scalia's seat open for more than a year, refusing Merrick Garland, President Barack Obama's nominee, either a hearing or a vote. Neil Gorsuch, a far more conservative jurist, took the seat instead. And now comes Kavanaugh. In blocking Garland, Republicans said it was urgent to wait until after the 2016 election to let the voters speak. They rushed Kavanaugh through to get him onto the court before voters can speak in 2018. When power is all that matters, consistency is for suckers. It's E.J. Dionne, people. In the process, the White House turned the FBI investigation of Ford's claims and Kavanaugh's questionable credibility into a whitewash. Donald McGahn, the White House counsel and Kavanaugh's leading advocate, told President Trump, as the New York Times put it, that a wide-ranging inquiry would be potentially disastrous for Judge Kavanaugh's chances of confirmation. You wonder what McGahn thought it would find. Now, by the way, there's also reporting out there that we haven't discussed yet that it is Mitch McConnell's claim that no, the parameters of the FBI investigation were hammered out in my office. That is to say, the Senate controlled the scope of the FBI investigation in this case. And I'm not sure who to believe. But back to E.J. Dionne's analysis, there's also this. A generations-long conservative majority on the court has been cemented in place by a political minority. This is all good points being made by a lot of people here. Kavanaugh was named by a president who won 46% of the popular vote and confirmed by senators representing 44% of the population. When you lack a majority, controlling the branch of government not subject to the voters is vital to working your will. Of course, when you lack a majority, you can still have a majority in the Congress anyway, and so that's sort of a problem that still needs to be fixed. Democracy is all that opponents of the coup have left. In next month's elections, the party responsible for this travesty must be punished. That's Republicans. The idea that both parties are equally to blame is an unadulterated falsehood, says E.J. Dionne, everybody. The undemocratic nature of representation in the Senate is unlikely to be remedied anytime soon, so progressives and Democrats need to organize far more effectively in the low-population red states. Critics of the judicial right need to remind voters that conservative judges regularly serve the interests of the wealthy and the powerful, not those of the heartland. If Democrats take control of the House, they should hold hearings on the administration's manipulation of the FBI investigation. These could also shed light on the extent to which Kavanaugh misled the Senate. And I am told that that is in the works, and I think I have here somewhere just to sort of distract myself a little bit just before the break. Probably a bad time to do it. I know I have a tweet here that I set aside that I got from, I got notice of from Armando, saying that Jerry Nadler, who would be, in all likelihood, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee of the House, should Democrats retake the House, has proposed doing just that. Yes, and here is, I think, this is the tweet, yes, or at least one of them, and so we'll keep that open for discussion after the break. We still have a minute before we start in on that music. Let's see what we can finish with E.J. Dionne here. There should now be no squeamishness about the urgency of enlarging the Supreme Court if Democrats have the power to do so after the 2020 elections. The current majority of the court was created through illegitimate means. Changing that majority would not constitute politicizing the court because conservatives have already done this without apology. That's going to be hard to make people swallow. But it's a good thing to do. And I don't know whether they'll necessarily have a hard time swallowing enlarging the court, but I do think that they would have a hard time swallowing Dionne's explanation of it. Well, it was already politicized by Republicans, because Republicans are, of course, telling their people, no, it wasn't. It was politicized by Democrats. You know how this game goes. Court packing, though, makes people uncomfortable for good reason. I don't know if it's such a good reason. Were it thrust upon the country suddenly by fiat, many Americans would be uneasy, as were even many Democrats in the 1930s when Franklin Roosevelt's court enlargement plan was put forward. That's why we need a considered 2-year debate over changing the number of justices. It was done 7 times during the 19th century as the only plausible response to the conservative court packing project that reached fruition on Saturday. Its foes need to stay angry, but even more, they need to vote, organize, and think boldly. Democracy itself is at stake, and I know that Armando would agree, although I don't know how often he likes to agree with E.J. Dionne Jr., not really sure. Maybe he could chime in on that one some time in the future. Time again for another break. We'll be back with more stories after this. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show on Netroots Radio. I told you I had a Armando tweet here, and I do. It wasn't, the tweet itself wasn't a big deal. It was just bringing to our attention the fact that there was an Intercept article, and I've pulled the Intercept article for our review. Akela Lacey has written this piece. In Letter to Trump, House Democrats promised to investigate Brett Kavanaugh for perjury if confirmed. Well, he has been confirmed, and I guess we'll have to wait and see how they deliver on this promise. Even as Brett Kavanaugh inches closer toward his confirmation as a Supreme Court justice, an inching that was completed over the weekend, of course. This is an October 4th article. Congressional Democrats are making a last-ditch attempt to bring attention to the nominee's potential perjury, including about his role in the warrantless surveillance programs of the post-9/11 Bush White House. Dozens of members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus sent a letter Thursday to President Donald Trump committing to leverage subpoena power in an effort to investigate the full record of Kavanaugh's time in the White House for evidence of perjury. House Democrats will have subpoena power if they retake the lower chamber in the midterm elections, and Representative Gerald Nadler, who will likely chair the House Judiciary Committee should that happen, has already promised to investigate any credible allegations of perjury if Kavanaugh is confirmed. Nadler did not sign the letter. How interesting. The Senate reviewed today the FBI's report on its 6-day investigation into claims by Christine Blasey Ford that Kavanaugh sexually and physically assaulted her in the 1980s when they were in high school. But the CPC letter raises distinct concerns regarding Kavanaugh's credibility that extend far beyond his time at Georgetown Prep, the suburban Maryland high school that has drawn intense scrutiny for its partying culture in recent weeks. The CPC members raised not only Kavanaugh's involvement in the Bush administration's widespread secret and illegal surveillance of Americans following the events of September 11th, but also testimony he made before the Senate during his time in the Bush White House that has since been called into question. Senator Pat Leahy of Vermont raised questions about the nominee's Bush-era record on the second day of Kavanaugh's nomination hearings last month, but the issue has otherwise received little of the Senate Judiciary Committee's attention. In the lower chamber, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi has demurred when faced with questions of how Democrats would approach Kavanaugh confirmation post-midterm season. "We are not about impeachment," she said Tuesday at the Atlantic Festival in Washington, D.C. Judge Kavanaugh has made misleading statements under oath on a variety of highly questionable actions and episodes, the CPC letter, which is first being reported by The Intercept, reads. Now, that seems like an awfully, well, is that an unnecessary thing to say? It's being reported by The Intercept. I know, I'm reading it in The Intercept. For example, he likely misled the Senate about his alleged involvement in Bush-era warrantless surveillance, as well as the administration's legal rationale for torture and indefinite detention. As of now, the Senate Judiciary Committee has been given access to only roughly 10% of Kavanaugh's White House record, the signatories to the letter point out. The letter also notes the possibility that Kavanaugh perjured himself, as the Intercept previously noted, in statements he made denying any knowledge of the sexual misconduct allegations against his mentor, former Ninth Circuit Court Judge Alex Kaczynski, prior to their being made public in 2008. 39 CPC members signed the letter to the White House. That's actually only about half, I think, of the membership of the CPC, but okay. By asking Trump to withdraw Kavanaugh's nomination before the upcoming confirmation vote, fat lot of good that did him, they joined a growing chorus of calls from Georgetown Prep alumni, you know about these things, members of the Yale law community, law professors, and Senate Judiciary Democrats. Some Democratic members of the House Judiciary Committee, Pramila Jayapal of Washington, Jamie Raskin of Maryland, Zoe Lofgren of California, Hank Johnson of Georgia, Karen Bass of California, David, how does he pronounce this? Cicilline of Rhode Island, Ted Lieu of California, Steve Cohen of Tennessee, all are among the signatories. Trump has doubled down on his support for Kavanaugh in recent days, of course, and the White House is unlikely to be moved by the CPC's efforts. Meanwhile, another organization has been attempting to get the Senate Judiciary Committee to revisit Kavanaugh's records on civil liberties. They've gotten little response. EPIC, the Electronic Privacy Information Center, a leader in advocacy issues of privacy and civil liberties, submitted 3 letters to the committee on August 8th, September 4th, and September 12th, outlining concerns over the handling of documents related to Kavanaugh's time in the Bush White House, as well as Kavanaugh's own interpretation of privacy law. The letters specify particular concern over the ongoing secrecy surrounding documents from Kavanaugh's years in the White House. Those documents, which have only partially been released to the committee, contain strong evidence that Brett Kavanaugh was a central figure in activities, including specifically the renewal of unlawful warrantless wiretapping programs and the secret expansion of the Patriot Act, according to EPIC. The group filed a lawsuit under the Freedom of Information Act, seeking the public release of documents from Kavanaugh's time as a top White House advisor. On Wednesday, the National Archives confirmed the existence of hundreds of records regarding Kavanaugh's role in controversial surveillance programs. Those include at least 11 emails between Kavanaugh and John Yoo, who authored a legal opinion backing the Bush administration's warrantless wiretapping program. Those emails, in addition to 300,000 pages of Kavanaugh records from his time in the Bush administration, are expected to be released this month, pending White House approval, according to EPIC. And of course, here the strategy is they'll be able to say, oh, his records were released. Well, after the fact, after we weren't able to do anything with them because he'd already been confirmed. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. I guess they could just stand there and gaslight that too and say, no, that's not the case. We released them beforehand. And they'll be partially right about that too, because there was another trove of those papers released perhaps a day or so in advance of the vote, having been held back for several months. But once again, they'll be able to point to things and say, no, we released thousands of pages, almost, I don't know. I might as well just gaslight you on everything. We released it all before the vote. No, you didn't. Yes, we did. Well, here's the newspaper articles that say you didn't. All right, well, fine, but we released much more. And we'll see how that argument goes. Those emails, let's see. All right, there was the EPIC suit. John Yoo, the Bush-era Department of Justice lawyer who helped write the Patriot Act and built the legal case for the surveillance program, was, according to a 2009 OIG report, responsible for drafting the first series of legal memoranda supporting the program. During the same time period he was exchanging emails with Kavanaugh, Yu was also arguing in favor of the president's authority to conduct warrantless searches to justify expanded electronic surveillance techniques in the wave of nationalist posturing that followed the attacks on 9/11, he wrote in a May 2002 memo. Between 2001 and 2003, Kavanaugh also sent 227 emails about surveillance programs in the Patriot Act and 119 emails concerning CAPS 2, that would be passenger profiling, also about fusion centers and the Privacy Act, Epic learned through its FOIA litigation. The cloud of sexual assault allegations surrounding Kavanaugh has overtaken the national conversation, but to Epic, the nominee's involvement in the surveillance programs is relevant too. It sure as heck matters if someone is going on the Supreme Court and believes that the government has the right to conduct warrantless surveillance, Epic spokesperson Mark Rotenberg told The Intercept. Rotenberg said the organization's only interest in the nomination debacle pertains to questions surrounding what Kavanaugh knew and what official actions he took as the federal government designed, implemented, and orchestrated the surveillance of American citizens. We believe he had a key role in the creation and expansion of the warrantless wiretapping, of the Patriot Act, of passenger profiling, of government surveillance fusion centers. All of this material, which had been previously withheld from the American public, is now apparently in the possession of the National Archives and has been documented as a consequence of our FOIA case. The second Epic letter, sent to the Judiciary Committee on September 4th, references Kavanaugh's dissenting opinion in Clayman v. Obama, concerns about which were also raised in a Cato Institute blog post on July 13th. The majority found that the federal government did not have legal standing under the Fourth Amendment to collect bulk data from Verizon customers. Epic argues that Kavanaugh, through his dissent, went out of his way to set out theories to defend the suspicionless surveillance of the American public that surprised even conservative legal scholars. Epic has submitted similar concerns to the Senate over Supreme Court nominees, including Chief Justice John Roberts and Justices Samuel Alito, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan in the past, but it has never taken an official position. The Senate simply can't vote on the nominee until we know more about his role in the surveillance programs, Rotenberg said. Of course, they did do exactly that. With no filibuster, Senate Republicans need 51 votes to confirm Kavanaugh. Even with a filibuster, Republicans still need 51 votes to confirm Kavanaugh. And even that isn't really necessarily the case. They would only need a majority of those present and voting. But you know how that goes. Republican Senators Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Susan Collins of Maine, and Jeff Flake of Arizona, this is hilarious looking back history now, are considered key swing votes. I'll just let that sit. On Thursday, both Collins and Flake described the FBI's most recent investigation into Kavanaugh, much decried by the Democrats, as thorough. Flake is allegedly still undecided at the time, asking his Judiciary Committee colleagues, Democratic Senators Chris Coons, one senator, Chris Coons of Delaware, to speak at length later. According to the Atlantic's Elena Plott, Coons has been a key force in attempts to further probe Kavanaugh's relationship with Kaczynski. Senator Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota, another red state Dem, broke her silence Thursday afternoon, saying she'd vote no on Trump's pick. Red state Dem Joe Manchin said he will not make a decision until tomorrow. You know how that came out. The Judicial Crisis Network, the organization which, according to Politico, has spent the most money on ads related to Kavanaugh's nomination, this week announced a $400,000 buy aimed at pressuring both Manchin and Heitkamp to support Kavanaugh. All right. Well, there you have it. I'm glad Armando brought that one to our attention. Important stuff enclosed therein. Let's see. Speaking of the vote and the Kavanaugh matters, let's see. There's a couple of other pieces. Another one from The Intercept, and one from New York, or is it New Yorker that we're looking at? Yeah. All right. Let's take a look at this one here. And why did they change the URL on this? It's from that section of the magazine known as The Cut, but which obscures the actual URL that the magazine itself uses. I'm going to also take a pause here to get the, once again, I'm going to have to start making sure when I save articles, it's very difficult to know right off the bat whether I'm looking at the AMP version or not, but this makes it easier. I'm just going to have to make sure ahead of time that we have the right view of it and not the stupid AMP version. So this is New York Magazine, where Irene Carmon, also on October 4th, had this piece about why Heidi Heitkamp's no vote matters. I've been thinking about this a little bit, and I'm glad to have had that vote. I was a little bit worried about her when she was saying that if she were voting strictly on the politics of it, that she might vote yes. And I'm glad that the vote did eventually come out no. And I was, like I said, it was worrying me, and I began just kind of, I was worried about how she was going to vote, sure, but I was wondering a little bit about, if she doesn't vote no, I mean, what's the point of electing Democratic women to these positions who are supposed to bring to bear their personal knowledge, understanding, and sometimes experience with sexual assault, sexual harassment, rape culture, etc., and inform the overwhelmingly male institutions of this, and to bring this perspective to bear in ways that'll change outcomes for the better for women in America. And the idea that there could possibly have been a yes vote was very troubling to me. But thankfully it came out the right way. And I guess Irene is probably among the not a small number, but a relatively large number of writers whose perspective on this I would be very interested in getting. And so we're going to get that here on the show as I read this piece, both to you and to myself for the first time. On Thursday, North Dakota Senator Heidi Heitkamp announced she will vote no on Brett Kavanaugh's nomination. This was a surprise. Heitkamp, who had said little about the nomination until now, voted to confirm Trump's previous Supreme Court pick, Neil Gorsuch. The most recent polls show her losing ground to a male challenger who said of Christine Blasey Ford's allegations, nothing evidently happened in it all. Even by her own accusation, it was supposedly an attempt or something that never went anywhere. And then, even if it's all true, does it disqualify him? It certainly means he did something really bad 36 years ago, but does it disqualify him from the Supreme Court? Those are the sorts of things that having a Democratic woman candidate are supposed to make dangerous for Republican men. To Heitkamp, it did matter, apparently. That the Kavanaugh vote may well go along party lines means Heitkamp is unlikely to win the same hosannas of bipartisanship bestowed on Jeff Flake in the past week, erroneously. Nonetheless, it required real courage, and the explanation she gave for her refusal was striking. As Senate Republicans have been shamelessly portraying Brett Kavanaugh as the victim of a Jim Crow-era lynch mob, and as Trump declares it, a very scary time for young men in America. And hopefully by now you have, by the way, seen the viral video of the young woman who put together her own song about that. I'd play it for you, but I don't want to violate her copyright. I hope you've seen it by now. Maybe we can just get a sampling of it at some point. Heitkamp, a white woman under enormous political pressure in a right-leaning state, chose to make clear who she believes the real victims are. That includes, but is not limited to, Christine Blasey Ford. When I listened to Dr. Ford testify, I heard the voices of women I have known throughout my life who have similar stories of sexual assault and abuse, Heitkamp said in a statement. Countless North Dakotans and others close to me have since reached out and told me their stories of being raped or sexually assaulted and expressed the same anguish and fear. In the end, Christine Blasey Ford's privilege and access, her lawyers and her girlish voice and her desire to be of help are still not enough to grant her due process. Due process would have meant being interviewed by the FBI and having the man she accused be subject to a more searching inquiry than 5-minute bursts from Democrats and aggrieved monologues from Republicans. It would have meant the FBI following up with the leads those lawyers offered. It wouldn't have included Senate Judiciary Republicans using the press to pass on smears of Ford instead of having the FBI adjudicate them. Heitkamp's statement acknowledged that historically, many victims have gotten even less, and she evoked her work to expand the reach of the Violence Against Women Act. I insisted that it include increased protection for Native women and girls. If that sounds like banal press release talk, it isn't. Those increased protections were the subject of a furious fight waged 5 years ago that wound up hinging on whether white men would be held accountable. A federally funded study found that Native women were not only likelier than other women to be victims of violence, they were, quote, significantly more likely to have experienced violence by an interracial perpetrator, unquote. But the very notion infuriated, you'll never guess who, Senator Chuck Grassley. The non-Indian doesn't get a fair trial, he insisted back then. That would be the same Senator Chuck Grassley who is presiding over Kavanaugh's nomination now, amid an ever louder conservative chorus that the judge, previously touted for his elite institutional acceptance, is actually the railroaded minority here. We remember that Atticus Finch was a lawyer who did not believe that a mere accusation was synonymous with guilt, said Senator John Cornyn. He represented an unpopular person who many people presumed was guilty of a heinous crime because of his race and his race alone. We also remember that Atticus Finch was a fictional white lawyer hailed as a hero for defending a black man against a white woman's false charges of rape. That was based on an ugly reality, one in which white women's stories of assault were only heard when their often false charges targeted black men and bolstered white supremacy. White women supplied the rationale for protection, and white men provided the mob violence. Today, powerful people understand that they need to at least appear as if they're listening to women, even as they are reluctant to shift the balance of power any more than absolutely necessary. There are still white women who know they stand to benefit far more from aligning themselves with white male supremacy than some objective standard of justice for all. The women supporting Kavanaugh and voting to confirm him are proof of this. Thursday morning on NPR, Missy Bigelow Carr, one of the 64 women who had rapidly vouched for Brett Kavanaugh's high school rectitude, said coolly of Ford, "I didn't necessarily find her that credible." Asked about Kavanaugh's blustery, teary testimony, though, Carr replied, "I found it emotional, as did many of my friends and people that know me and know my support of Brett, who texted me and emailed me and spoke to me how they felt it was emotional, that they were crying in a lot of cases, sobbing in other cases. It was emotional to see. It was a guy fighting for his reputation, feeling that it was him against the world," which I think it has been. And that's infuriating on a completely different level. Obviously, the most obvious angle on that being that, once again, women, you're not allowed to cry, but apparently the men can cry all they want, and that's super genuine, whereas in women it's weakness. The interviewer, Rachel Martin, asked Carr if she thought that if Kavanaugh had committed sexual assault as a high school or college student, it would be disqualifying. There was a long pause. Carr sighed. "I think that would depend on it. I guess essentially it really depends. There's so many degrees. I think now we're in a day where times are a little different than they were back then with what those accusations were. I think you have to look at the entire life of somebody, not something they did as a teenager. Back in those days, there was certainly drinking of beer. That's when you're doing these kinds of things. An incident in high school, it's kind of hard to believe that at this level of federal government that that's what we're looking at to try to disqualify somebody from this position." That is some real squirming. So strong is the urge to defend Kavanaugh, whom she conceded she had mostly lost touch with since their youth, though she didn't mind signing a letter saying she hadn't, that she was offering a forgiveness Kavanaugh has never asked for. a white patriarchy persists in part by making white women dependent on white men, and then ensuring that those women enjoy benefits in exchange for their support of those men's continued dominance at the purposeful expense of identification with, connection to, and support of other women. My colleague Rebecca Traister writes in her book, Good and Mad. And yes, that has been raised a number of times in a number of ways by a number of you out there. That was, of course, true in the era Cornyn was trying to evoke on Kavanaugh's behalf, and it is true now in the refrain heard on the right from mothers of sons. Here is NRA spokeswoman Dana Loesch. As a woman and as the mother of sons, I am horrified by where this is leading for boys in our country. Memes circulated with messages like, mothers of sons should be scared. It is terrifying that at any time any girl can make up any story about any boy that can neither be proved or disproved and ruin any boy's life. In Mothers of Massive Resistance, White Women and the Politics of White Supremacy, Elizabeth Gillespie McRae points out that the women who fought to protect racial hierarchy justified their political activism in the name of motherhood, attesting to the real power that particular gendered identities carry in the public realm. Often the assertion of motherhood was understood to elevate their concerns and grant them a kind of moral supremacy. It is very interesting, and there's lots out there today and in the past day about the mothers of sons kind of meme. We'll get to that in a second. The moral supremacy deployed on behalf of the men who run the Senate, the House, the presidency, and soon the Supreme Court was available to Heidi Heitkamp. It could have helped her stay a senator. This was her choice. Even if in the end it makes no difference in the outcome, her resistance mattered. It says matters, but it did. We'll say it mattered and it still continues to matter. Yes. Very interesting. I think might as well mention one of the more ridiculous pastimes of the last day or so was the now deleted tweet by a woman who was claimed to be speaking on her son's behalf. What was that? She was, I don't know, tweeting under the handle of, Navy Blue Star Mom or whatever. And you may have seen this thing. And as a matter of fact, there's a diary at Daily Kos that updates this story in an interesting way. Trumper mom uses son's photo to support they've got a hashtag for this called him too. Like he too. He was wrongly accused, except there aren't enough stories of people being wrongly accused in order to fill out the hashtag. So him too seems to be a hashtag full of stories about people who are alleged to have, I don't know, changed their behavior and dating habits for fear that they would be wrongly accused, which isn't a terrible thing, by the way. The wrongly accusing, that's terrible, but changing your behavior might not be. But you might have seen this thing, a since deleted tweet, captured, in screen caps, so it's still out there. I don't know whether it was a tweet or a Facebook entry or what, but Blue Star Navy Mom 3, allegedly a woman by the name of Marla Reynolds, saying yesterday or on October 6th, "This is my son," and she includes a rather ridiculous looking picture of him in Navy uniform, but okay. "This is my son. He graduated #1 in boot camp." I don't know if that's a big deal or not, or true or not, but anyway, he was awarded the USO award. He was #1 in A school. A capital A, and this is all, I'm sure, military Navy lingo with which I am unfamiliar. "He is a gentleman who respects women. He won't go," this is the funny part, "he won't go on solo dates due to the current climate of false sexual accusations by radical feminists with an axe to grind. I vote. Hashtag him too." Well, of course, that resulted in a number of memes being lobbed her way in retaliation. And of course, some of them were hilarious, and the more ridiculous, the better, were the photos of people claiming that, various weirdos of all stripes were their son, including, everything under the sun, really. It was funny reaction, to say the least. And, but the upshot of it, the real kicker to all this is at the end here, the guy in the picture, takes another shot of himself in the same ridiculous pose, although this time in his civilian clothing. Peter Hansen is his name, and he tweets, "That was my mom. Sometimes the people we love do things that hurt us without realizing. Let's turn this around. I respect and believe women. I never have and never will support him too. I'm a proud Navy vet, cat dad, and ally. Also, Twitter, your meme game is on point." Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think we may have talked straight into the beginning of the last break. It wasn't any major revelations you would have missed, but a very interesting thing. The subject of the "This Is My Son," the original "This Is My Son" Twitter post, making the announcement that no, his mom doesn't speak for him, and her whole point was rather ridiculous. And he just wanted to let everybody know that. And, well, sometimes our moms embarrass us, and that's the way it is. All right, now I want to catch up on some breaking news before turning to another important piece of the Kavanaugh puzzle as we wrap up that story for the time being, though we do take our cues and stay mad, stay focused on it, but there are definitely some other things we got to keep our eye on as well. The breaking news brought to my attention both by Scott in the background and also by Rebecca Romans through our KITM hashtag. Trump has accepted the resignation of Nikki Haley as UN ambassador. No telling exactly what drove that, though I understand she was in the news again recently for another questionable expenditure, or rather questionable practice this time, the acceptance of rides on private aircraft as she flew back and forth between South Carolina, D.C., and her job posting in New York. There was, of course, the other story about the very expensive motor-driven curtains, though it was also alleged that that was a purchase put in motion in the Obama administration. And ordinarily, I would say, oh, that makes sense. I believe that, but you never know. With this Trump administration, they may just say, go out and say that that's the case, and most people will then drop the subject. Who knows? Some speculation about what might be next. There were some people saying, well, if Jeff Sessions is fired or departs after the midterms and Lindsey Graham's audition for the Attorney General job during the Kavanaugh hearings was successful, maybe he'll take that job. And Nikki Haley could slide into that Senate job, but others pointing out, nah, that might not necessarily be the case here. The tweet actually retweeted to us by Greg Dworkin is that of Peter Hamby, who has this to say on the subject. Lots of this out there. Important factor. The Haleys have never made any real money, and it's something they're mindful of. Being in the Senate doesn't fulfill that goal, and she's not a fan of being one of 100 legislators anyway, so it might be that she has something else in mind. Hank Epton speculating everything is so absurd that he's going to end up making Ivanka UN ambassador to get her back to New York. That might not be a bad idea. Okay, I mean, it would be a terrible idea for the country and the world. It's just something else. All right. I didn't want to leave the Kavanaugh story entirely, even though I think it was an important update that we find out about that crazy meme. But on the same subject, I have a piece here that will also give me some respite. I thought about saving it for Friday and filling out the the pre-recorded show with the help of friends, and I'm still interested in doing that. And by the way, if you've got anything at all you were thinking of contributing to the show, it would be a big help for our Friday entry. But I have Paula Appanese has got another entry here on the Kavanaugh fight and how to regard it in hindsight. Was anything accomplished? Was the fight worth it? What were the things that might have been accomplished? How should you be thinking about how the whole thing went down? Let's hand the mic over to Paula and do some deep breathing exercises in the meantime.
Hi, David. I have some thoughts on the Kavanaugh fight. The most important of which is the fight was worth it. We lost the battle of the Kavanaugh nomination, and that really sucks. But the good news is we inflicted heavy casualties, and that is very, very important. We also learned that resistance helps gum up the works. It changes the playing field. It changes narratives. It persuades and educates, and it helps make Republicans look really bad. Had we gone into this nomination with the attitude that numeric reality meant that we could not defeat him, so therefore our fight was pointless, Kavanaugh would have ascended to the court weeks ago with his Mr. Nice Guy persona intact. Instead, he is irretrievably tainted, and the nomination process is widely seen as illegitimate. Furthermore, he added to his stock of perjury, he is unpopular nationally, and Democrats on the committee now have several avenues to pursue when we regain power. The possibility of impeaching Kavanaugh with public acceptance exists in a way that it would not have had this fight not happened. In addition to all of that, during the spectacle we just witnessed, Republicans revealed themselves to be the dishonest, corrupt hacks that we have all known that they were, but that many Americans did not. And now they do. The Republican Judiciary Committee leadership came off as a group of senile, dirty old men, and rape-supporting, perjury-excusing Susan Collins and her rape-supporting, perjury-excusing sidekicks Jeff Flake and Ben Sass revealed themselves to be the showboating liars that we feared that they were. And now we know, hopefully once and for all. Because the thing is, when you are in a war, you need to know who your allies really are. And when things look bleak, while you wish people on the other side would help you, you cannot plan or react effectively if you count on people who are going to betray you. So it's better, however painful, to strategize based on the advantages you genuinely have without reliance on wishful thinking. Try watching the movie The Darkest Hour. See Winston Churchill facing up to exactly how desperate Britain's situation was as British leaders debated whether to fight Hitler or appease him. And yet they won in the end. They won because they put up the best fight they could with the resources they had and that they could muster. So the point is, you need to know who your friends and enemies really are. Which brings me to Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin is a traitor. Joe Manchin's vote wasn't merely or solely for a man who may or may not be a sexual predator. It was a vote for a definite perjurer. It was a vote for a mean drunk. It was a vote for a hyper-partisan rat fucker. It was also a vote for a blatantly corrupt nomination process. It was a vote for a cover-up. It was a vote for Donald Trump. It was a vote against women. It was a vote against Democrats. It was a vote against the truth. So to hell with Joe Manchin. Having said that, we are in a war, and victories in the midterms offer the chance to change the balance of power. So on a practical level, I say we need to think of Joe Manchin for the next few weeks as a double agent, but one who has to do certain things publicly to retain his cover and to not betray his status as a traitor. A Manchin win may assist in toppling Mitch McConnell. So if you live in West Virginia, think of Manchin not as the rape and perjury excusing traitor that he is, but as a unit that we need, a walking meat sack devoid of value save for one thing: the label Democrat he wears can help us gain the Senate. Hold your nose, vote for him. You can hate him while you do it. After election night, we're going to see where we are, and then we can determine if there are ways to penalize him. And if we don't gain the Senate, we need to think of him in our plans as another Republican. At any rate, the fight was worth it. I am enraged and I am disgusted at the outcome, but make no mistake, we drew blood. Mitch McConnell says things will blow over. He's wrong. Lisa Murkowski says there needs to be healing. Other voices start their incessant whining about incivility. Rape supporter Susan Collins goes on television to whimper about this being the hardest vote she ever cast. In other words, Republicans know they did something heinous, and they are hoping that they will skate, that we will get over it, that we will stop screaming and stop protesting and stop being mean to them. And to that I say, nope. Justice first. Only then should we contemplate mercy. I am enraged, and my rage will energize and sustain me through these next weeks until we get our chance at a reckoning. The House looks promising, the Senate less so. The possibility of cheating by Republicans or Russian interference lurks in the background. We can count on nothing. Our hope relies on massive turnout, and we will see if that's enough. And if it isn't, we have to be ready for an entirely new phase in this war, and to prevail in the end, we must always know two things. One, we need to know who our friends and enemies actually are, and two, whatever the odds going in, we cannot win if we don't fight. Whether we win either the House or the House and Senate, or for that matter, if we lose or are cheated out of a win, there are going to be Republicans to deal with, and they will pull all of their dirty tricks out of their grimy bags in an attempt to thwart us. So learning how to wage a fight and finding out who you can count on was very important for us, because there's going to be more fights ahead. Hang in there, everybody. This is Paula at paulawriter.com.
Thank you, Paula. And a welcome respite as well, by the way. But very good points. And sometimes there are great lessons to be drawn even from things that don't come out the way we wanted to. And these are among many that I think we should take with us. By the way, apparently Greg Mitchell tweets that is actual speculation on CNN that Ivanka really could take that ambassadorship at the UN. I don't know whether anybody would object to that or approve it. I don't know how that would be received in the Senate, but the way he tweets it, I don't know. I'm not certain whether it's for real or not. CNN speculation, Ivanka could take over at UN. Omarosa, no longer a possibility. I don't know whether that was ever considered a possibility, even when they were still on the same team way back when. But it would be an excellent way of getting Ivanka back to New York without anything embarrassing happening. I mean, outside of appointing her UN ambassador, which would be a pretty embarrassing thing all by itself. But also a way of getting Jared Kushner, I guess, out of the White House, if he's fed up with that guy's presence as well. It would be a very face-saving way for Ivanka and Jared to pack up and return to New York and get out of D.C. So that's out there. Speaking of New York, I wasn't planning on going this direction, but I just saw Josh Holland tweet the story from the New York Post. The tweet says, "The Long Island Hitlers." Now, that's not like a baseball team or anything, right? The Long Island Hitlers are staunch Republicans, but don't care for Trump. Who said the Never Trump movement was dead? Apparently, a story saying that some of Hitler's long lost, last relatives are secretly living in Long Island, or living secret lives on Long Island. I don't know whether they lived under the name of Hitler or not, or whether they're related to Gay Hitler DDS from Ohio, one of our favorite dentists of all time. I just think that's sort of an interesting question and an easy way to recall one of our favorite episodes. Do they live under the name of Hitler, or did they change their name? I don't know. Interesting story. Starts off, they're the Hitlers next door. Every good story starts out that way. Some of Adolf Hitler's last surviving relatives have been living under the radar on Long Island for decades, according to a new report. Now, that's a reason to build a panic room. Forget MS-13. We're focusing on the wrong thing here, but apparently they're law-abiding folk, as far as I know. Is there any indication of whether or not they changed the family's name after the war, moved to Patchogue with his German wife, and changed the family's name first to Hiller and then to Stuart Houston, according to the original source on this, the German newspaper Bild. But I don't know. We don't really necessarily have to go too far into that. But what a fun and interesting observation to make in the middle of all this. So we'll try and keep an eye on the UN ambassadorship situation and find out whether or not we're going to end up with Ivanka Trump there. Let's see. Is there anything, anybody else discussing that or confirming it? I don't know. Too many things flying by too quickly to be sure of that. Anyway, high praise there, Paula, for your piece from Jack Ox, who says, wonderful pep talk. You made me feel better. I wish my first cousin once removed, David Axelrod. Oh, interesting. Could hear it. He's a good man, but much too polite. Senator Schumer should also hear, and Nancy Pelosi, girl, you keep on. And I'm quoting here. I'm not going to, I don't know if I'm in a position to say girl to anybody. I don't know what the politics of that expression are outside of the community of women, not to mention, or I guess people who are speaking to actual girls. I guess that's okay. Anyway, thanks, Jack, for sending us that comment. I'm sure Paula will be glad to hear from you on that front. I agree. It was a good pep talk. We get good pep talks from Paula very frequently, and they are very necessary when you sometimes run into, well, disappointments like this. All right. Let's see. Other things that I had in mind for discussion. I'm going to have to flip back to Pocket. There were definitely a few other very interesting entries. This one I mentioned, I had another piece on Kavanaugh from the Intercept. And again, Akela Lacey on this one, along with Ryan Grimm. This was an interesting sort of backgrounder, explainer thing that I don't know how much credence I put in it, but it seemed like a fairly plausible theory worth putting out there anyway, as perhaps maybe today's capper on the Kavanaugh situation. Susan Collins and Brett Kavanaugh, both in the Bush family inner circle. That helps explain her vote, as opposed to that she's just sort of a craven, self-serving Republican who doesn't really have any governing philosophy at all, which though satisfying in the sense that we can make her sound really terrible, doesn't really tell us a great deal. Let's see what their speculation is on this one. The announcement Friday by Senator Susan Collins of Maine that she would vote to confirm Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court was about family, namely the Bush family. Remember, they are a big presence in Maine. George W. Bush and his father, George H.W. Bush, have both been welcomed into the ranks of the resistance to President Donald Trump. Allegedly. I don't know how accurate a statement that is, but they speak ironically, perhaps, about the fact that though there was some criticism of Trump from them, and so people said, okay, good. And then others got angry. How can you forget what a terrible president George Bush was? No one's forgetting that. It's just also good when he says bad things about Donald Trump. But he's no hero, clearly, but other people want to argue the other side of that from time to time. Anyway, though they've both been welcomed into the ranks of the resistance, but their most consequential action since his election has been to help lift Kavanaugh onto the Supreme Court. Collins is an honorary member, they say, of the Bush family. She got her start in politics as a congressional aide to Representative-turned-Senator William Cohen. The Maine Republican was close to George H.W. Bush, who has long maintained a presence in the state. That's kind of a tenuous tie, but there it is. At the end of the first Bush administration, Collins was appointed New England Regional Director of the Small Business Administration. In 1996, she was elected to the Senate to replace her mentor, Cohen. Kavanaugh, too, has longstanding ties to the Bush family. He served as an attorney for George W. Bush's campaign, playing a major role in the legal battle between Bush and Al Gore. He then served as staff secretary in the Bush White House, a position of intimate influence. The staff secretary attends most Oval Office meetings and is a trusted sounding board for the president. Bush nominated Kavanaugh to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals in 2003, and Democrats put up a serious fight, arguing that he was far too partisan to be within striking distance of the Supreme Court. The pushback dragged the confirmation process out for 3 years, and he wasn't confirmed until 2006. Bush stuck by him throughout it, and Kavanaugh refused to withdraw. By the way, that's another great lesson of Kavanaugh, the Kavanaugh episode, both this one in the early 2000s and this one today. Never withdraw, never resign, etc., etc. Many people saw the parallels there and pointed, of course, to Al Franken's rather rapid resignation in the face of allegations about his own behavior and compared it with this. Anyway, Bush stuck by him throughout it, and Kavanaugh refused to withdraw. In 2004, while his nomination languished, Kavanaugh married Ashley Estes, who had been George W. Bush's personal secretary, dating back to his days as Texas governor. They had met in the Oval Office, and the Bushes attended the wedding. Fast forward to Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court. In the weeks after Kavanaugh was accused of sexual assault during his high school and college years, Bush personally called wavering senators, lobbying on the nominee's behalf. Collins, who has said she would not vote to confirm a Supreme Court justice who would overturn Roe v. Wade, was one of those wavering senators. In August, HuffPost reported, citing a source close to Collins' staff, that Collins had assured the White House that she would support Kavanaugh if he were nominated. She has denied that. Collins has since said that the decision was a difficult one, though there was no hint of that agonizing in her Senate floor speech on Friday, which was a full-throated defense of Kavanaugh and a prosecution of Christine Blasey Ford's allegations. Collins calmly laid out her arguments for Kavanaugh's fitness for a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court. She said she believed he would maintain protections for Americans with pre-existing conditions seeking medical care, that he would not hesitate to vote against the favor of Trump should the situation arise, that he would support same-sex marriage and access to contraceptives, that he would honor the precedent set in Roe v. Wade as a constitutional tenet that has to be followed. Of course, if all those things were true, conservatives would not have enthusiastically embraced Kavanaugh as their man for the Supreme Court. Although, I guess you could point out, and this is a terrible long shot, and I don't in any way believe that this is going to be the case, Republicans have, on frequent occasions, found themselves severely disappointed, terribly let down by the people that they've placed on the Supreme Court in anticipation of their conservative ruling, only not to ever see it materialize. Don't believe that's going to be the case here, but historically, it is out there. The Maine senator went on to laud the organizations that have supported Kavanaugh throughout his judicial career, including the American Bar Association. It became clear as Collins made this point that she had not yet seen the letter from the ABA to the Senate Judiciary Committee released Friday morning announcing a plan by the group's standing committee, we didn't get to discuss this because I was off the air Friday, to reopen its evaluation of Kavanaugh. I don't know what the upshot of that is going to be and whether they're going to bother at this point. We will find out. When the subject turned to Ford, Collins was careful to make clear that she did indeed believe Ford was sexually assaulted. She just didn't think it was by Kavanaugh, which is absurd, of course. She went out of her way to break down each point in Ford's testimony that did not, quote, meet a standard of more likely than not, unquote, conflating a Senate confirmation process for a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court with a civil trial. Collins took pains to point out that Ford's own friend, who she had placed at the party where her alleged assault occurred, Leland Kaiser, said she didn't know Kavanaugh. The senator asked why, if Ford left the party early without saying bye to anyone. No one called the next day to ask why she left, or if she was okay. Maybe they were drunk and they didn't notice. But I'm not going to have to relitigate it. We know it's a stupid question. It's when passions are most inflamed when fairness is most in jeopardy, Collins said, arguing that due process concerns drove her thinking. In the end, Collins suggested that she hoped Kavanaugh's nomination would restore the faith of Americans to in the Supreme Court, easing partisan tensions and decreasing the number of 5-4 decisions the court handed down. It's difficult to rationalize the idea that a nomination as contentious as this would usher in a return to a more harmonious era of bipartisan collaboration. Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, meanwhile, said She hadn't made her decision to vote against Kavanaugh until she walked onto the Senate floor Friday morning. The decision for her, she said, was based on two competing values: Kavanaugh's qualifications as a judge and the defense of the integrity of American political institutions, not just the Senate, but also the Supreme Court. Kavanaugh, during his hearing last week, put on a vitriolic display of partisan anger not seen in the modern confirmation process. He called Democrats on the panel "you people" and said that his critics were part of a well-financed conspiracy to enact revenge on behalf of the Clintons. On Thursday night, he took the extraordinary step of publishing a semi-apology for his outbursts in the Wall Street Journal, acknowledging that he may have been, quote, too emotional. But he did not take back his own threat of revenge. What goes around comes around, he told the committee, nor did he acknowledge that his outburst was part of his prepared remarks, not a spontaneous reaction to being challenged. Senator Jeff Flake, who on Friday also said he'd be voting to confirm Kavanaugh, said earlier this week that Kavanaugh's tirade should be considered as a part of the decision-making process. He said, "We can't have that on the court." Oh, we now do. So that's that. Just thought I would point that out. Interesting speculation. I don't know how much the Bushes necessarily had to do with things or not, but it's worth considering as another moving part in all of this. And let's see. Just a few minutes left before handing things over to Justice Putnam for his program. And we'll be mindful of that and tell you what's coming up in just a few minutes. Let's throw one or more. How much time do we have to throw this in? Should we throw in this contrarian-ish take, though it's an AMP version, from Vox, Matt Iglesias, in the headline, "Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation will delegitimize the Supreme Court, and that's good." I don't think that strays too far from Armando's own analysis of this thing, basically saying it's time America woke up to the radical right that's run the court for years. Don't think we'll be able to fit in the entirety of the article, but I wanted to give you the headline and give you the gist of things and open up the possibility of further discussion on that take. And also here noting the New York Times reporting, and I know everybody hates the New York Times, on the FBI review of Kavanaugh being limited from the start. And I don't know whether this makes any discussion of what, this is mostly laying it on Don McGahn controlling the issues. I'll have to find for you the mentions from Mitch McConnell claiming that he was the one that limited. Everybody wants a part of limiting this story, apparently. Okay, lots of intrigue swirling around this one. All right, pretty soon we're going to have to get back to Trump, Russia, and various other aspects of the story that have developed over the last couple of days. That perhaps we can continue with tomorrow. Tomorrow being Wednesday. Greg Dworkin will be back with us. Joan McCarter back as well. We'll have to check in on the unfortunate news that has ensued since her last visit and round up much more and keep the ball rolling here as we move toward the end of the week. Okay, let's see. Anything else that actually absolutely positively must be shoehorned in here before we close things out? I don't think so, but boy, is there a lot we haven't gotten to here, and some of which is similarly related to the Kavanaugh story. Some of these things we're just going to have to let fall by the wayside. All right, let's call it then for the end of the day and hand the microphones over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. That coming next, and we might as well use this opportunity and the upcoming very pleasant background music that will make it so much more enticing when I tell you what's coming up next here on Netroots Radio. And that's a good cue to start the music. West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is now open, and in case you had not figured this out, we have time to tell you that it is open for business every 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock a.m. Pacific Time, 11 to noon Eastern Time for those of you here on the East Coast. And for our especially special daily specials, the Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, as he likes to call the Tuesday program. Ready? Starting off in the Bistro Cafe. May I suggest? the chef's suggestion. A Texas Me Too activist explains why she and others blocked the Lamar Bridge in Austin, Texas yesterday. I'd like to hear that explanation. I have a pretty good guess as to why that might have happened. On the rest of the menu, University of Washington college Republicans flipped out and threatened to sue a local bar for refusing to host their pro-Kavanaugh kegger. And bake them a gay wedding cake as well. I don't know why that bothers them so much all of a sudden, but okay. A Montana Tea Party leader is charged with distributing explosives. Surprise. Possessing illegal machine gun parts and other weapons. And the DeVos Company is implicated in the new report on fishy communications between the Trump Organization server and the Russian Alpha Bank. I keep forgetting to get back to that one. They are back in the news. We'll hit that later in the week. I'm sure of it. And more after this.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Like I said, more to come with Justice next. The GOP is losing women in battleground districts it needs the most. And more than 130 kids still separated from their parents 74 days past the court-ordered deadline. How many troops do they have? I guess they've got none. All that and more on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice next.